Hey Boston, what's going on?
Hey Steve, good morning.
Good morning to you as well. How are things?
Things are going well. Excited with the progress so far. How about your end?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. Tell me more. What's going on for you? Good to hear about progress always. What led to it? What is it and what led to it?
So, just the process of understanding the components of it made a big deal. I've been studying for about 2 months now, two months and a week, and I've fortunately jumped 10 points from 156 to 166. And I have 19 days now until the August LSAT. So we're trying to decide the best use of our time moving forward.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic increase already. And so where do you need to pick up those last few points?
So I'm missing on some flaw questions and some of the harder sufficient assumption questions.
Okay. And what does your review process look like?
So I've been doing full practice exams 2 to 3 times a week. Whether it's 2 or 3 times depends on how quality of a review I'm able to get in, and not burn myself out. So I'm going in and doing a blind review, and then for the questions that I miss, what I'm doing is trying to verbalize why I thought why I thought my answer was correct, and then why I was actually wrong about that, and why this answer is actually the correct answer and my answer was wrong. But I haven't been able to get it to stick whenever it comes to test time.
Okay, so that's part of the process of review. What about analyzing the stimulus?
I might be missing on that one. Can we
Okay.
talk? Let's go more into that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I recommend what I call the Socratic review method,
Okay.
which requires analyzing where your misunderstanding stems from. Is it the stimulus, the question stem, or the choices? You talked a little bit about the review process for the answer choices. What was tempting about the wrong answer that made you pick it, and what ultimately makes it wrong? And what was unappealing about the right answer that pushed you away from it, and what ultimately makes it correct? But the choices are just one piece of the puzzle. There's also the stimulus, and there's also the question stem. So when you read the question stem, are you properly identifying which question type it is, what it is that they're asking you for? So for flaw questions, obviously, it's flawed. You're looking for the flaw. Are you then taking the time to pre-phrase the flaw when you go into the stimulus? So you read the stimulus, are you looking to extract that flaw and articulate it for yourself before going on to the choices? So there's a moment to pause and reflect on what is the task being asked of you.
Would that? Oh yes, I'm definitely aware that I'm looking for the flaw. I think that, so for example, one got me the other day when it was like the answer, said something like comparing to an implausible scenario. And I'm thinking in my head, well, I can't assume that this is implausible. So little details like that. And I think that I need to tie up probably where my assumptions are within the answers, maybe.
And that's part of what review can help you do, is to help you find where that line is of what is reasonable to assume and what's crossing the line. Sometimes you can't articulate this theoretically. It can only be done through reviewing a lot of questions and getting a better intuitive understanding.
Got it. So could you give me a little more details about the Socratic review?
Yeah. So I talked about the choices. We talked about the question stem. There's also the stimulus. So you want to think about what about the stimulus may have tripped you up. Was there a particular method of reasoning that you weren't able to fully absorb? A lot of times students will read the stimulus, they'll be confused by it. They'll say, okay, well, I'll look at the choices and see if that helps. But the choices only further complicate things, really, because they only make sense in the context of the stimulus. And they only make sense when you're keeping first and foremost, what is the task being asked of you in the question stem. So there are lots of different ways they can ramp up the difficulty level of the stimulus. Confusing wording, failing to include evidence conclusion indicators or conditional indicators, using words like unless, except, until, without, burying the conclusion in the middle, topics that you don't like or that pre-law students typically don't like, so things like science or things like philosophy that tend to get away from people's everyday real-world experience. And you're not going to fall for all of those, but there are certain ones you're uniquely prone to falling for, or certain ones that will uniquely give you difficulty. And so recognizing that and focusing on it will help you avoid making the same mistake in the future. And I have tons of videos on this if you just look up Socratic review method on my YouTube channel, for example.
Perfect.
And then also you talked about verbalizing. So what does your verbalizing look like?
So in the cases where I can, I'll say the author failed to consider that, or the argument takes for granted. I try to use those key terms when I can. And then if I don't have like eloquent way to put it, I just try to reverbalize my internal justification, which is in my own, I guess, vernacular, and then try to roast it, like, tell myself like, dude, that was really dumb, and then verbalize it in the way that LSAT would likely think of it, or how I think they would think of it. And sometimes I'll write it down as well, and that helps me with it too. But I think something that you mentioned, I think I'm probably not giving myself enough time when I'm going back to the few that I flagged. When I finish the section, I'll go back to the few that I flagged. And what I've noticed is I almost always miss the ones that I'm flagging. But I think that I'm jumping too much into the answers, and then just going back and skimming the question stem, or excuse me, the stimulus, instead of really diving into the stimulus again one more time. And I think that if I have 4 that I have flagged, I'm probably better serving myself by really getting into 2 of them than maybe just trying to go through 4. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it could be worthwhile to do 2 questions in depth to really get them, rather than covering 4. But there's also something to be gained, I think, in terms of your review process, where you better understand these questions after the fact, so that next practice test, it goes better.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to look up your more information on your Socratic review. Do you know, are there any, do you have any resources or any indication in an era or a decade of tests that August test takers might look at to refresh based on the more recent flex tests that have been given?
Well, the flex tests are all undisclosed up to this point, at least, and I suspect they will be going forward as well. But LSAC is pulling from past exams from the past decade that were undisclosed. So, as always, more recent exams are more relevant. If you review anything from the past decade, you'll be reasonably prepared for whatever may come your way. So, with only a few weeks left till August, I wouldn't spend time on exams in the 20s and 30s. Those prep test numbers, I would stick with prep test numbers primarily in the 70s and 80s.
Perfect. And I know I've heard you talk about it before, but I don't remember your exact position. We've talked about it actually a little bit, about burnout. I asked you, how do you know that, how can you tell you're starting to burn out? And I realized how you can tell about a week after asking you that. If a person feels like they're processing the full exam and they're processing their review, do you think that it's okay to take more than 2 tests in a week leading up to it, or do you think that you're just likely going to burn yourself out and that it's inevitable?
It's not necessarily inevitable, especially for the flex where you're doing 3-section exams, presumably, not 5 or 4 even. So it's more possible to do more exams than it was in the past for practice. But I would also look to see what increasing the depth of your review could do for you in terms of benefit, and then also how much time it would take. If you're reviewing these in enough depth, you may not have time to do 3 exams and review all the questions you get wrong and all the ones you have difficulty with.
So what is your opinion on question type drilling? Do you think that I should maybe go in and do just flaw question type and sufficient assumption question type and just drill a mix of those?
Yeah, it sounds like you've noticed that that's a weak area or a trend you want to focus on. So I would drill that on the side. So maybe you want to do 2 exams a week, review those in depth, and then rather than doing a 3rd exam, you drill flaw questions, you drill sufficient assumption questions.
Awesome. Cool.
It sounds like you got plenty to keep you busy over the next few weeks, but also avoiding doing too much, avoiding the burnout. So taking breaks as well.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Any other questions for today?
No, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any for me?
I guess I would ask you, how much time would you aim to spend on reviewing full-length exams? Each exam that you do.
You know, early on, I was spending 3 to 4 hours whenever I was missing 25 to 30 in the full length or the 4-section exams. Now that I'm prepping the flex 3-section exams, I'm missing more in the 7 to 12 range. And so with those, not missing logic games at all. So it's been a lot shorter, maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And that's primarily all on LR. My LG's been, I've missed like 1 here and there, 1 or 2 here and there. And then with reading comprehension, I'm pretty consistent around -3. So my primary review comes in the LR, and obviously doesn't take as much time to prep for the actual review question.
Okay, well, the fact that you've improved is awesome, and that does mean that there would be less time necessary to review. But if you add on reviewing the stimulus or reviewing the question stem in your general approach, that may lead you to spend exactly the same amount of time now compared to previous, because you're going more in depth.
Absolutely. It's probably necessary.
Yeah, definitely worthwhile for sure.
Cool. I really appreciate your time, and I love your YouTube channel and your blog posts and podcasts.
Awesome, Boston.
Driving around, we play the clips, and you hone in on some of the important short questions. It's cool to have a little playlist go through.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. We'll keep at it, and let me know if you need anything moving forward. It was great connecting with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.